the longest chunk of sleep I ever got was 4 hours.
Welcome to 10 Minute Travels. With me as always is Phil Freeman.
And with me as always is Shane Patrick. And today we're going to be talking to Emily Maxwell, Iditarod Musher.
Let's get right to it, shall we? I mean, I was trying to do some math, thinking about when you first, the Iditarod, I think are you too young to remember when Susan Butcher was just slaying it?
I didn't know of her, and I didn't really keep up, at that time. I think I probably, as a kid, because I'm 35 now, I was definitely around when she was way up there.
Right.
That was the days of the joke. Did you hear why Rick Swenson got disqualified from the Iditarod? They found too much estrogen in his blood, in his system. But women were reigning back then. It was beautiful. What a sport where it didn't matter what gender you were.
Yeah.
You had to be tough, and you had to have this special bond with your team.
Right.
It's a sport like no other.
Yeah. Well, even this year, they had 3 women in the top 10. I think that's the most women to ever finish that high.
And there was a woman in the very second one, first one's 73.
Right. Yeah.
I have a question. I didn't put it on our questions, but I've been to the start twice now, the real start up in Willow. And it's an emotional time for me. I don't tell anybody, but I get tears in my eyes because it's so beautiful, because there's so much energy there. And you have this monologue going on over the PA system of the introduction of each musher, and you realize they're going to take off, and they're going to spend. The Iditarod has several different routes depending on snowpack, but it's how many miles?
Roughly 1,000.
It's 1,000 miles, and so they shoot across this flat lake, and they're surrounded. There's a corridor of cheering people. And then they zip into the forest. And then suddenly whatever was going on in the lake is no more. And they've got another 999.5 miles of solitude to go. What is that like to go into that forest after the big shebang of the start?
I mean, to be honest, I feel like both years, and especially the second year, I had the perspective of the first year and kind of knowing what you go through at the beginning and then how it changes and then getting out onto your own where those people aren't there anymore. And I've both years really enjoyed that time going across the lakes, and it's, really awesome and you see a lot of people that that are there cheering for you, and people you don't know, and kids are handing you cookies and candy and, all this stuff. It's really neat. But I will say both years I found myself kind of relieved, like getting past the crowds a little bit. Cause then it's into really what because when you're out on your training runs and you're running 1,000 miles way before, a 1,000-mile race, and there's nobody out there cheering you on your training runs. And so it's a little more comfortable in some ways, I would say. It's tons of fun to have all those people there, but it feels a little more natural once you do get past it.
So what I'm hearing is there's a relief once you hit the woods, where I would think that was where the anxiety would start. Oh my gosh, I've got almost 1,000 miles to go now.
There's plenty of anxiety in my experience. And I remember thinking my first year, like the last few days of the race, because it's kind of this, at least for me, sort of this bell curve, that, the first few days, it's like your adrenaline's pumping and everything's new and exciting. And then you get into like 5-6 days in, and then you're kind of becoming trail hardened and you're just used to it. You're out there, you're doing it, and it gets hard to remember that there was a time when you weren't doing that. And then a few more days go by, and then you're so tired and you've been out there so long, it kind of, the idea of what's real becomes a little more vague in your mind, that you realize not everybody in the world is doing this right now. This is like a really kind of weird thing that we're out here doing. And then the last few days, I remember thinking on that race, like, man, I could take some of those people that were cheering, yelling your name and handing you cookies right now, kind of like keep you going. Because towards the end, you know, you get onto this emotional roller coaster with no rhyme or reason. You know, sometimes you feel great, and then 20 minutes later, you just mentally, emotionally, you're kind of like bottoming out, and there's no good reason for it other than, you know, I think the chemicals in your brain are getting a little wacky.
So you're talking how many days in a row, and how much sleep are you getting on average every night?
My first year, it took me 11 days, 13 hours, 55 minutes, and 56 seconds. And in that time, I probably got, the longest chunk of sleep I ever got was 4 hours. And I probably got about 4 hour chunks. Other than that, you know, you're doing a lot of lying down for 45 minutes to maybe 2 hours. And to be honest, you've nod off a lot on your sled.
Do you tie yourself to your sled?
I don't. I haven't. I've definitely known of people that have. And I've known of people that have fallen off their sled when they've been asleep and their dogs took off down the Yukon River without them and ran all the way to the next checkpoint and checked themselves in and stopped right at the checker. But obviously that's not really ideal because then you got to walk to the next checkpoint and hope somebody picks you up. But no, I don't tie myself to it. I don't think I've been asleep for like long periods of time. It's more, you know, you start to nod up and then you realize, you know, and your head bobs up. Yeah.
When you're taking those cat naps, are you just naturally waking up because of nerves, or are you setting alarms, or both?
A little bit of both. I have a GPS that I always set an alarm on. And it was crazy, though, even, you know, a lot of times, even in day-to-day life, I hear a lot of people say that they'll wake up 2 minutes before their alarm goes off every single morning. Mm-hmm. And it's just like your body knows. And that actually did happen to me a lot on the race, even with as tired as I was, that my eyes would just shoot open. And then other times where I was like totally shocked and this noise is happening and I, you know, it's under my sleeping bag and I can't find it. And you're, you know, you kind of don't know which way is up. Because when you're so tired and you take this very short sleep and then you wake up, it can be very like, you don't know where you are or what's going on. And it really takes a minute to come back to the present.
So staying on sleep for a while, how were the dogs always waiting for you? Or, I mean, I know you have enough dogs and they live long enough that they have their own personalities and whatnot.
You mean as far as like coming, like when we take a rest and
yeah. Like, are they like, let's go, Emily? I mean, what is up?
It depends on how long you stop and rest. There's kind of a rule of thumb, at least, you know, from the person that I learned the most from was, you know, if you're going to stop and rest the dogs, you want to stop for either less than 45 minutes or more than 4 hours. Because in between, it's not efficient rest. You know, if you're going to really rest them, you need at least 4 hours. And that's like the reset button. And some people even say 5 hours. You know, if you're going to stop at a checkpoint and throw them a snack and check their booties and just do a few things, they say you don't want to stay more than 45 minutes because that's when they start like to unwind. Really, they're not thinking about running down the trail. So, but no, I mean, you know, especially early in the race, you kind of have to force them to rest. You know, a good sled dog, a trained sled dog understands when you get to a checkpoint, and this is part of why, you know, you qualify and you do training runs and everything, is that you want to teach them to rest because a lot of times they just want to keep going, and they have to learn that, you know, when we stop and I give you a nice big meal and everything, you need to eat because I want you to keep your weight on. I want you to be healthy. And then I want you to lie down and rest. And my one leader was the one that really, it's like a little kid that doesn't want to lie down and take their nap, but they're sitting up with their eyes about half closed, you know, and he would do that and his head would be kind of swaying and he would find that he'd be always the last one to lie down. But that sleep and that rest is really important, and to get them fed and to get them resting. And my team that first year especially really did super great. I mean, they ate everything I ever gave them. Every single one of them. It was amazing. And that's like your dream, because if they don't want to eat something or they don't want to sleep,
something's wrong.
Well, yeah. And I mean, you don't have a lot of wiggle room for them to, like, say, miss a meal and then go run 100 miles, because that's where that weight loss starts to occur. And that can make them sick. And then they don't want to eat, and it just becomes a devolving thing, you know? So it's really worrisome to a musher if your dog won't eat.
Right.
So I got really lucky, and I think the feeding schedule and the sleep schedule for them was just right that first year.
And then for the training part of it, are you doing stuff like, are you giving them cues that this is only a 45-minute rest, or this is a throwing the mats out or something like that? Yeah.
So normally their cue that we're going to stop and rest a long time is that you put straw down for them. That's their bed. So, you know, on a training run, you know, if you say carry some straw with you and you run out, say you do a 4-hour run out and then you put straw down for them, that's their cue. And they love straw. It's like one of my favorite moments in racing or running dogs is when you put the straw down and they get all excited and they burrow down in there and they like put their little heads down. But yeah, so that's kind of their cue. If they're not on straw, that's sort of the cue that we're not stopping yet.
That was Emily Maxwell. If you want to learn more about Emily or any of the other things we do at 10 Minute Travels, please check out 10minutetravels.com.
And we want to remind you to make sure that your sense of humor matches your sense of adventure.
And please like, subscribe, and share this podcast on all the platforms.